Most people think their biggest problem is outside of them, their situation, other people, lack of opportunity. But what if the real problem is something much closer, something you carry with you into everything you do, something that distorts how you see yourself, how you respond to failure, and how you handle success? And the dangerous part is you don't even notice it.
That is, it's a pretty heavy thought to start with,
It
honestly.
really is, right? But, that invisible force, that silent saboteur, is exactly what we are here to deconstruct. In this deep dive, we're examining a whole collection of historical examples, some philosophy, some psychology.
Yeah, trying to figure out how ego really operates in the shadows of our everyday lives.
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to hold up a mirror. We want to look at how this unseen force quietly sabotages our growth, learning, and progress, and, well, explore what happens when we strip away all those delusions.
And it is a incredibly necessary mirror to look into, even if it's deeply uncomfortable. Because, when we hear the word ego, our minds usually just default to the Freudian concept.
Right, like the rational rider desperately trying to control the wild horse of our unconscious drive.
Exactly. Or we picture a clinical egotist, like a raging megalomaniac billionaire shouting at his assistant.
Totally.
But the ego we're dealing with today is far more subtle, and because of that, it is infinitely more dangerous. We're talking about the casual definition of ego.
Which is just an unhealthy belief in our own importance.
Yes, it's that petulant child inside every single person that simply chooses getting its way over anything or anyone else.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what we are really talking about is a mechanism that lives inside you and me. It's the voice that causes what an early member of Alcoholics Anonymous called a conscious separation from the world around us.
A conscious separation, that's a great way to put it.
And the most insidious part is how it tricks us. It literally convinces us to seek validation instead of doing the actual work. I was looking at the story of the author and activist Upton Sinclair in our sources, and it completely blew my mind.
Oh, the 1934 campaign. Yeah, that is a wild story.
Right. So he runs for governor of California. It was a long-shot campaign. But instead of doing the grueling, unglamorous work of canvassing and rallying, he does something totally bizarre.
He wrote a book.
Before the election even happened. He publishes a book titled I, Governor of California, and How I Ended Poverty. He literally lived the victory in his head so fully that the actual campaign just became a boring afterthought.
It is a profound psychological trap. Sinclair wrote that book in the past tense.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, vividly outlining the brilliant policies he had supposedly already enacted. And observers at the time, they noted an immediate fatal shift in his demeanor. He just lost all interest in the gritty reality of the campaign.
Because his ego had already given him the emotional reward of winning.
Exactly. In his imagination, he was already the hero, so his brain basically asked, why bother enduring the friction of real life?
Yeah.
The book was a bestseller, sure, but the campaign was a crushing failure.
He lost by what, 250,000 votes?
Something like that, yeah. The moment his talk got out ahead of his actions, his will to bridge the gap between fantasy and reality just collapsed.
Which is something we say constantly today, just in different forms. Think about your own life or anyone scrolling on a phone. You decide you are going to get in shape, so what do?
You buy the gear.
Right. You post a perfectly filtered picture of your new running shoes on social media. You post the photo, and immediately your friends start commenting, you're crushing it, and so inspiring.
And you haven't even taken a step outside yet.
Exactly. Physiologically, your brain gets the exact same dopamine hit as if you had actually gone out and run 5 miles in the freezing rain. The ego loves the talk because it mimics the feeling of the work without any of the sweat. We confuse the symptoms of success with the work of success.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that specific neurochemical trap is precisely what modern technology is engineered to exploit.
Oh, totally. Every time you open an app.
All right, an empty text box is just begging you to fill it. What's on your mind? Or compose a new post. There's a brilliant observation in our sources regarding the writer Emily Gould.
Oh, yes. I remember reading that part.
She landed a massive 6-figure book deal, which is, the dream for any writer. But then she spent 2 entire years completely paralyzed. Instead of actually writing the novel, she spent her days tumbling, tweeting, endlessly scrolling.
Just performing the act of being a writer.
Exactly. It didn't advance her manuscript one bit. It didn't earn her a dime. But it felt like creative work. It was a daily performance that protected her ego from the terrifying reality of actually writing.
Because doing great work is inherently agonizing. It is terrifying to stare into the void of a blank page or start a new project and risk producing something terrible.
Yeah, failure is scary.
So ego steps in as a short-term salve for that insecurity. It replaces the harsh, objective reality of your current abilities with this, like, comfortable, warm bath of self-absorption.
Perfectly said. Silence is terrifying to the ego. The ability to keep yourself out of the conversation, to just subsist without external validation, it requires immense internal fortitude. Silence is the actual respite of the confident and strong.
Which brings up that tension, the choice between looking successful and actually doing the work. And that's beautifully illustrated by the military strategist John Boyd.
Yes, John Boyd, a brilliant, uncompromising, and largely uncredited architect of modern military strategy.
The sources highlight this incredibly intense speech he used to give to his young acolytes, the to be or to do
Hold on.
speech.
Boyd would pull a young, ambitious officer aside at a critical inflection point in their career and tell them they had reached a fork in the road. He'd explain that they could go one way and be somebody.
Make the compromises, turn their backs on their friends, say the right things.
Exactly. Get the promotions, be a member of the club, or they could go the other way and do something. They could fight for what was necessary, innovate, actually serve their country.
But they likely wouldn't get promoted.
Right. They wouldn't be loved by their superiors, but they would never have to compromise their soul.
Wow. To be somebody or to do something, that is such a chilling, clarifying ultimatum. Think about what happens when you get a promotion at your job. Does your ego instantly prioritize updating your LinkedIn profile to make sure the world knows you are somebody?
Oh, usually.
Or do you spend that first week terrified of the new responsibilities, quietly diving into the work to figure out what you actually need to do? The ego craves the title, the corner office, the applause. It wants to be.
But true, grounded purpose only cares about the uncompromising reality of the work.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if ego is the barrier that prevents us from doing the work in that aspirational phase, what happens when we actually manage to push through? What happens when we actually achieve something?
Well, it doesn't just vanish once you reach the top, unfortunately.
Right. From everything we're examining, it mutates into something even more destructive. It mutates powerfully because success warps our perception of cause and effect. When we win, our brain misinterprets the data. We start thinking that we are the sole magic ingredient.
Rather than recognizing the years of hard work, the brilliant team members, the massive strokes of luck.
Exactly. The legendary basketball coach Pat Riley called this the disease of me. It's the sudden onset of entitlement, control, and paranoia that strikes a winning team or a successful individual.
When the friction of reality temporarily disappears, you start believing your own myth.
You calculate your own importance, your chest swells, you begin nursing petty resentments.
And that leads to some genuinely absurd historical behavior. The sources bring up the ancient Persian emperor Xerxes.
Oh, this story is unbelievable.
He is invading Greece, and he orders his engineers to build pontoon bridges across the Hellespont Strait, but a massive storm surges and destroys the bridges. So what does the emperor do?
He doesn't just rebuild them.
No, he orders his men to throw chains into the river, give the water 300 lashes, and brand it with hot irons. He literally punished the ocean.
And he beheaded the engineers, just for good measure. I mean, it sounds hilarious and deeply pathetic to us now, but that is precisely what entitlement and control looked like when they completely detached from reality.
It's pure delusion.
Right. And we see the exact same pathology in the modern era with John DeLorean. He left General Motors to build his futuristic car company, absolutely convinced that his sheer, unadulterated genius was the only variable that mattered.
DeLorean is a fascinating case study in the delusion of control. He was a brilliant engineer, but he assumed that brilliance meant he didn't have to do the interpersonal work of management.
He created a wildly dysfunctional organization.
Overbearingly political. He refused to delegate, he mismanaged the supply chain top to bottom, and most dangerously, he absolutely refused to be managed or advised himself.
Yeah, he just chased what one executive called colored balloons until the entire enterprise collapsed in fraud and a $250,000 loss.
Because success tempts us to create false narratives. We achieve something, and suddenly we look back at all the messy, chaotic, terrifying moments where we almost failed, and we smooth off the edges.
We tell ourselves, I knew it all along, it was my grand vision. We fall in love with our own press clippings.
And the supreme danger of that false narrative is that it leaves us entirely unprepared for the inevitable moment when the tide turns. because failure is inevitable.
Always.
And when it hits, the ego makes that failure unbearable. It adds self-injury and defensiveness to the mix. But I actually have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Doesn't a person need a certain amount of ego to survive a massive failure? Think about it. When your back is against the wall, when the market turns on you, when everyone is doubting your abilities, isn't that bluster, that internal armor of, I'm great, they're wrong, absolutely necessary to keep you from collapsing?
This raises an important question, and it is the exact defense mechanism we all default to. But the answer is no. Ego isn't armor. It is a prison. Yeah. The philosopher Epicurus famously noted that the narcissistically inclined live in an unwalled city. When your entire sense of self is fragile and dependent on life constantly validating your greatness, you are completely exposed to the elements.
So any little thing can hurt you.
Exactly. Every flight, every piece of critical feedback, every market downturn feels like a mortal wound. You turn objective, indifferent events into personal attacks. In psychology, that is called narcissistic injury. True strength doesn't come from shouting down reality. It comes from looking at failure coldly, without the distortion of pride.
Which is perfectly embodied by Katharine Graham. The story of her taking over the Washington Post is staggering.
It really is.
Her husband tragically commits suicide. She is thrust into the leadership of this massive newspaper, facing a ruthlessly sexist business environment that just assumes she will fail.
They completely underestimated her.
Completely.
Yeah.
And then she has to navigate the incendiary waters of publishing the Pentagon Papers and exposing Watergate. If she had relied on the ego's armor, if she had walked in demanding respect and puffing out her chest, she would have shattered.
She would have crumbled under the sheer unfairness of it all, or she would have lashed out defensively at her critics. Instead, she relied on stoic resilience. She anchored herself in a deep, objective sense of purpose.
She focused entirely on the work, the journalistic integrity of the paper.
Right, rather than on how the crisis made her look or feel. It is about how we utilize the time we are forced into when things go wrong. The author Robert Greene articulates this beautifully with his concept of dead time versus alive time.
Yes, dead time versus alive time. When we experience a brutal setback, we face a binary choice. Dead time is when we sit around passive. We wait for things to happen. We plot revenge, or we drown in self-pity.
That is exactly what the ego wants, because anger and pity feel emotionally profound.
Right. But a lifetime, on the other hand, is when we are utilizing every single agonizing second to learn, to act, and to improve.
And the quintessential example of choosing a lifetime is Malcolm X. When he was sent to prison, he had every justification to give in to the ego's desire to sit in absolute rage.
The ego screams for you to riot, to argue with the guards, to write angry manifestos.
Because anger feels powerful. But instead, he checked out a pencil and a dictionary from the prison library, and he sat in his cell, copying the entire dictionary word for word from cover to cover.
Imagine the sheer unglamorous boredom of that.
Exactly. It was agonizingly tedious.
Mm-hmm.
But choosing that dictionary over rioting was an act of intentionally killing his ego to serve a future purpose. He used a situation he absolutely did not control to painstakingly build the intellectual foundation for everything he would later become.
So what does this all mean? If ego poisons our aspirations by making us talk instead of work, if it poisons our victories by making us complacent and our defeats by making us defensive, what is the antidote?
How do you build a foundation that survives all that?
Exactly. How do you withstand the narcotic of prosperity and the crushing weight of failure?
Well, the antidote is a profound, rock-hard humility. It is a fundamental reorientation toward long-term growth and clarity. The ancient Romans actually formalized the concept for this, which our sources refer to as the canvas strategy.
The canvas strategy.
Yeah. In the Roman system, there was a role called the anti-ambulo, which literally translates to one who clears the path. They would walk in front of their wealthy patron, communicating messages, making way through crowds, doing the grueling logistical work to make the patron's life seamless.
It's almost like being the ultimate roadie for a rock band. You are intentionally doing the grunt work from the inside out, handing over the immediate dividends, the applause, the credit, so that you can learn how the show operates.
Retaining 100% of the long-term equity in your own skills. Benjamin Franklin used this strategy brilliantly.
Oh, with his brother's newspaper.
Yes, as a young man, he didn't demand his own column. Instead, he anonymously slipped letters, written under a pseudonym, under the door of his brother's print shop at night.
And his brother printed them, took the credit, and made the profit.
Exactly. Franklin deferred the glory so he could secretly practice his craft, test public opinion, and perfect his writing without the pressure of his ego being on the line.
But in a world that screams, fake it till you make it, how do you stay quiet without getting left behind?
What's fascinating here is the stark distinction it draws between artificial ego and earned confidence. Ego is stolen, it's self-anointed, and its swagger is just an insecure artifice. Confidence, on the other hand, is earned through quiet, relentless, uncelebrated work.
Say little, do much.
Exactly. When you adopt the Canvas strategy, you are actively choosing to be the least important person in the room. You find canvases for other people to paint on until you build the undeniable leverage to change your position.
But that requires a conscious commitment to always stay a student. You can never graduate from humility. The mixed martial arts pioneer Frank Shamrock has an amazing system for mastery that forces this exact mindset.
Oh, I love his system.
He says that no matter how good you get, you always need three things: a plus, a minus, and an equal. A plus is a mentor who is better than you, who can teach you. A minus is someone you can teach, which solidifies your fundamentals. And an equal is a peer who can challenge you daily.
Shamrock's system is a perfect mechanism for ego suppression. It forces you to constantly update the appraisal of your own talents downward.
You can't fall into the trap of believing your own myth if you're getting tapped out on the mat by an equal while realizing how much you still have to learn from your mentor.
It just purges out the hot air that puffs up the ego. It all comes down to maintaining your own internal scorecard. Our notes highlight how the New England Patriots operated during their dynasty.
When they drafted Tom Brady in the 6th round.
Right. They didn't let their ego tell them they were visionary geniuses who saw what no one else could see. They coldly acknowledged that it was largely a stroke of massive luck. And instead of throwing a parade for their scouting department, they immediately went back to work to figure out how to improve the roster further.
That is the essence of an internal scorecard. The legendary UCLA basketball coach John Wooden operated the exact same way. He never judged his team's success by the literal scoreboard at the end of the game.
Right. He judged it by a ruthless internal standard of absolute maximum effort. He'd ask, did my players do the absolute best they were capable of doing today?
And if the answer was yes, they were successful even if they lost the game. When you hold yourself to a standard that significantly exceeds what society considers objective success, the external noise, the praise, and the criticism, it simply stops mattering.
That ties directly into a critical distinction our sources make between passion and purpose. We live in a culture that is utterly obsessed with passion. We're told to be frantic, to burn bright, to be overflowing with emotional zeal.
But contrast that modern franticness with someone like Eleanor Roosevelt. She didn't operate with wild, performative passion. She operated with calm, methodical, unwavering purpose.
Passion is ego-driven. It is entirely about you and how intensely you feel about something. Purpose is about the work itself. It is realistic, deliberate, and detached from the image.
Passion is form over function. It's the desire to look like you care.
Well, purpose is function, function, function. It radically de-emphasizes the I. It simply asks, what needs to be done right now? What is the next small, correct step? And then it proceeds with quiet deliberateness.
When you are driven by purpose rather than ego, you don't need the spotlight. You don't need to brand the river or whip the ocean when a storm destroys your bridge. You simply gather your tools, adjust the blueprints, and go back to work.
Exactly.
Before we close, this all builds to one final, incredibly powerful concept that hasn't been mentioned yet: sympathia.
Yes, sympathia is a profound Stoic concept. It is the realization of our absolute connectedness with the cosmos, this sort of oceanic feeling of belonging to a tapestry much larger than ourselves.
It's the ultimate perspective shift.
It really is. If you ever feel your ego taking over, if you ever feel consumed by a slight at work or a failure in your personal life, go stand on an ancient battlefield. Stare up at a star chart in the middle of the night. Walk along the edge of a dark, crashing ocean.
When you truly meditate on the immensity of the universe, you realize that woolly mammoths were walking the earth at the exact same time the pyramids were being constructed.
You realize that countless generations have stood exactly where you stand, felt the exact same anxieties you feel, and passed into dust. In the face of that infinite expanse, your own self-importance instantly evaporates. Ego simply cannot survive when it is confronted with the infinite.
If there's one thing to take from this, it's that growth doesn't just require effort. It requires honesty, the kind of honesty that forces you to look at yourself without distortion. Because the moment you start seeing clearly is the moment you stop getting in your own way. So the question is, where might your own ego be quietly holding you back?